Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the channel if this is your first time. This is a video that is a new video for the Historathon 2024. This is big year-long event that's all about history, and there's a particular focus on some of this video that I might sort of go off on a tangent a little bit, possibly, I don't know. But this is about the Q3, quarter three, third quarter of the Historathon, which means that it's the years between 1500 and 1820. Okay, so each quarter, as a co-host of the event, I will be putting across some possibilities, some of the things I'm reading, some of the things you might want to look into if you're interested for those quarters. The Historathon's broken into 4 different quarters. The first quarter was from early prehistory days up to the year 500 AD. And then the second quarter was 500 to 1500. So a big stretch of time there, 500 to 1500. And this third quarter, which is where we're in now, is 1500 to 1820. I am going to talk a little bit more about this particular event that I'm going to talk about now in another video with some other books, but I want to talk about the English Civil War. So I'm going to bring it a little bit up to date and say that history is always relevant. It's always important to look at history, to understand your history, to know and have some kind of take on what happened. The interpretation of history does change through the years, but sometimes it can be a real insight into the way we think and the way we behave en masse, and the way that our relationship to the powerful and to the powerless has developed, and some of the things we can look out for. And sometimes it can show you crucial moments, key moments in a country's development that set it off on a different course. And that is absolutely true for the English Civil War. So the English Civil War is pretty much the 1640s. It started a little bit before that, but ultimately the bulk of the things that happen that leads in 1649 to Charles I's decapitation, regicide, is the 1640s. And it's an extremely crucial part of English history, because it changes government. It brings about a new democracy that wasn't there before. So, you know, if you're looking at the news at the moment, there's all sorts of things about democracy at the moment. And I don't think we should ever take for granted the fight that's been going on for centuries for the right to vote and the extension of the vote and all those kind of things. And there are more things that get developed in later years, but this is such a big moment that takes our attitude to monarchy and to Parliament into a new stage. Whereas before the Civil War and before people got really angry and disenfranchised with Charles I, before that happened, there was this sort of the rule of divine rule of kings, where the monarchs of England thought that they deserved to be there because God appointed them, and there was no question that they should be making the rules, and Parliament had a much smaller role to play. Once the Civil War happened, that changed everything, and the monarchy became stifled, and it was really a country that was led by Parliament. And the monarch, a sitting monarch, had a very small role and didn't really have much power. And that kind of has continued through the centuries, got more and more like that, especially as once that gets established and Parliament gets that important role, then you get into a period where you've got to fight for ordinary people to get the vote. So a vote for all men first, that's a fight in itself. And then there's obviously the suffragettes and the fight for women to get the vote as well. And there's such crucial parts of English history because, you know, around sort of 1846 and 1848 You had the Chartist movement, which was bringing the vote, extending the vote to ordinary men. And that was so important. And that wouldn't have happened if there wasn't this shift in the way that we ruled ourselves, thanks to what happened with the English Civil War. So this period is so important. So because of that, I love studying it, and I've got tons and tons of books I've shown you in previous videos about the Civil War. But there's a couple of books here that I haven't read. So I got this one from the library, Ian Gentle's The English Revolution and the Wars in the Three Kingdoms, 1638 to 1652. So I'm going to be looking at that one. And an intriguing title, this one. This is The Restless Republic, Britain Without a Crown. And I read the back when I bought this, and there is a suggestion in this book that the country wasn't happy with Cromwell's reign, and it was like an accident waiting to happen with Charles II coming back. Cromwell actually died very shortly after becoming a protectorate and ruling England, which is kind of bizarrely ironic in some ways. But yeah, he didn't live further than 1658 was when Cromwell died. So he didn't live to see the fruits of this new sort of change in Parliament and change in the English democracy for very long. And he was getting less popular anyway. And his brother, Richard Cromwell, didn't want the power at all. And it was just a very easy second revolution, bringing Charles II back, and then brought forward the Restoration period, which was a very seen as a happy period for culture and art and the country as a whole. So this stuff is really important and really fascinating. So this book suggests that the ending of the Civil War, the impact of the Civil War, wasn't a good one until it got restored and Charles II took power. So that's a kind of an intriguing book. As I said, I've got loads of other books about the Civil War that I've kept from my own purchases when I was a student studying it in my degree. But I've got a few others here as well. There's Jeremy Black was one that, as an historian, I used a lot in my degree, and I hadn't read this one. This is 18th century Britain, 1688 to 1783. This is clearly going to touch on what I've just said about the Glorious Revolution, which is when Charles II came back, and going into the development of the initial stages of the Industrial Revolution as well. So, again, very fascinating stuff. I also want to look at two other countries. I want to look at the French Revolution, and I want to look at Napoleon. So I've got a book here by Christopher Hibbert called The French Revolution. I did actually study the French Revolution in my degree, but I don't really remember a lot of it. And the way it was taught, I wasn't going to keep a lot of that information. So I'm going to read this one, see what comes up. And I've picked out this book, which is about the aftermath of the French Revolution and Napoleon's final days, and the impact and legacy of Napoleon as well, which I think is really interesting. So, Passion, Death and Resurrection, 1815 to 1840, Napoleon. That should be a really interesting book. This is the third part of 3 books that Philip Dwyer's written about Napoleon, which I think is interesting as well. And before I go away from before we go from England, I suppose, I have picked this out from the library. I used to own this, and this was a massive part of my studies when I was a student. But I want to look at it again because I don't remember a lot of it, and it's a seminal work. It's a very important history book, and E.P. Thompson pretty much laid down a very almost like the final word on the development of the working class in England during the shift from the feudal system into the Industrial Revolution. The Making of the English Working Class by E.B. Thompson. And I'd like to read the chapter in this book, The Story of Russia, that looks at that period. So there is a chapter, actually it shouldn't be too bad because it's just a chapter. I'm quite very positive about finding this, The Shadow of Napoleon, There's a chapter before that called Russia Faces West, which also covers this period. So my idea is to read Russia Faces West and The Shadow of Napoleon from this book. So, Story of Russia. So that should be interesting. But as I said in previous videos, I want to play catch up, and there's this lovely folio book about the Black Death that I'm going to be reading as well before I get onto those books. So there we are. There's also, have I got access to it here? I haven't abandoned hope on reading this either. So this is from the second quarter, but as I said in the previous video, I want to play catch up a little bit and read this as well. So there we are, some nice things to look at, really significant things. This is the Crusades through Arab eyes, which I think that's a very important thing for someone coming from my end of the world to read, because a lot of the education we get about the Crusades is very one-sided. So yeah, I'm quite cynical about the whole Crusades thing anyway, so it'll be interesting to see what that book says. So there we are. Let me know below what you think is interesting and all that, and if you know a lot about the Civil War, you didn't know much about the English Civil War and you'd like to look more into it, but it's a very significant moment in our history, and Parliament changes completely, and we're going towards a much more vital and inclusive democracy, thanks to that initial stage of breaking the absolute power of the monarch through Charles I. So there we are. Thanks for watching. Stay curious.
Paint me a picture